My name is Angie Nader from Technolock Marina, and I'm here with Adam Urrutia, who is a City Council candidate of this 2018 year. So the reason why I have Adam here today is because we're talking about some of the petitions that we have going around within the city of Marina. The first one that we're going to talk about is the cannabis. So Adam, why don't you give us a brief overview on the cannabis?
Yeah, gladly. So the sort of backstory about how we ended up writing a cannabis initiative is that for years, people in Marina have been talking about having a medical marijuana dispensary in the city and the potential to bring jobs to the city, to bring revenue to the city, and to make it easier for people who need access to medical cannabis to get their medicine here locally. But for years, the city council has been resistant to even bringing the issue up for a vote of the people. And because it is kind of a political hot button issue, we felt that it should be a vote of the people. The people should decide. It shouldn't be just 5 people on the city council deciding if it happens or doesn't happen. And so this has been a discussion that's been going on for a long time. But with the pass of the Adult Use of Marijuana Act last year, now the discussion's brought in to consider adult use marijuana. And so we've seen the county and neighboring cities all pass ordinances to allow medical or adult use cannabis dispensaries, cultivation, manufacturing, delivery services within their cities. And we've had time to see the results. And the results have been positive. You know, the county's bringing in millions of dollars from their fees that they charge for cultivation. Other cities are bringing in, maybe a couple $100,000. But, for something that people are indicating that they would like to have in the city and that brings revenue to the city, we think the people deserve a chance to have a vote. So those of us who are proposing to put this to a vote of the people saw that the city council was not going to put it on the ballot themselves. And so we looked to what others had done. We went and saw the city of Seaside, that wrote a very comprehensive ordinance outlining how adult use cannabis and medical marijuana dispensaries would be permitted within their city. And so we just basically took their ordinance, brought it into Marina, and adapted it, swapped out the word Seaside for Marina, and changed the land use designations because they have land uses that we don't have, and we have land use designations that they don't have. And so with very minor changes, we turned it into a Marina ordinance that we are now collecting signatures on in the city, going door to door, talking to friends on the phone, going to collect their signatures. Local shops are keeping the petitions behind the counter for people to come in and sign, and also standing in front of grocery stores or going to the farmers market to collect signatures. But so, yeah, we're poised to wrap up the signature gathering phase. We'll be turning in signatures soon, and hopefully we'll have the requisite number of verified signatures, and we'll be able to vote on this in November and let the people decide if they want this in Marina.
So I know a lot of people, they've been debating it on Nextdoor Marina, and Brandon Kelsey in February, he posted a poll, and the poll was, should the city allow recreational marijuana sales in Marina? 62% of the people voted yes, and 38% of the people voted no. So I'm just going to go through some of the issues that some of the people had, and we can just discuss them really quick. So one of the first questions or concerns that people had was, somebody replied, no, because it is still illegal federally. California may be okay with it, but distributors are still committing felonies. We don't need that attention. Let's not forget there's an open federal land in Fort Ord. Can you say trafficking felonies for anyone driving through? Change the federal law first. So what would your response be to that?
Well, I think California passed, I think it was Prop 247, sorry about getting the number wrong, back in 1996, which allowed the use of medical cannabis, which was illegal per the federal government. So we have over 22 years of people in California accessing cannabis, legal under California law, illegal under federal law, and we haven't had significant issues. I know that there have been some federal government raids on people who were actually violating California law by having too many people be part of their collective, or they were growing more plants than was reasonable. And so with very little federal action in the intervening 22 years, I think that should give us a pretty good sense of what's likely to happen in California. But we also have 2 years of California under the Adult Use of Marijuana Act, and no city or county has been brought up on federal charges in the last 2 years. But I really don't think that the federal government would go and select Marina to be the city that they're going to use as their poster child for this. Our ordinance is totally in line with the other ordinances around the state. I think if the federal government did wish to shut this down, they would just shut it down at the state level so that they could get all 58 counties and all 200 whatever cities in one fell swoop. I don't think they'd go and prosecute individual cities. So I don't see that as being a problem. I guess being adjacent to federal land, well, a quarter of California's land is federal land, so most cities and counties are adjacent to federal land. I don't see that being a big issue either.
Another concern that somebody had was, my reason for voting no is simple. We have enough revenues without the need to have additional income. We have the luxury of being able to wait and see what happens in the other jurisdiction and make the decision to legalize it for retail sales in Marina, if and when we need additional revenues.
So I would sort of attack the premise of the argument that we don't need additional revenues. Right now, Marina probably needs $4 million a year just to sort of achieve an additional $4 million a year, just to achieve about a baseline of spending. We have a $1.4 million deficit going into our roads. So every year we add $1.4 million or more to the deferred maintenance on our roads. If the gas tax is repealed in this November's election, you can add $600,000 to that. So we'd have $2 million a year annual deficit going into our roads. I don't think anyone can say that our parks are, great by any means. We don't have bathrooms at our parks. A lot of the equipment is old or rusty or broken. We have sidewalks in our city that don't connect to each other. So between roads, sidewalks, and parks, we have just a huge backlog of deferred maintenance that we need to take care of, and we do not have the revenues to do it. You've also got a fire department that has only 11 firefighters when we're supposed to have 12, and in recent conversations with the fire chief, he's talking about a need to actually add 12 additional positions to our fire department as it grows, so that we can have all of the things that you need to have as a fire department, having a fire marshal, having a second engine company, having division commanders. We don't have those things. We would run a very lean operation in both our fire department and police department, and we have to consider that we are paying our public safety employees and our non-public safety employees below the market rate for the area. So I would argue that we don't have enough revenue in our city. I don't think that the cannabis initiative is really like a silver bullet. It's maybe going to bring in a couple $100,000. So I don't think it's going to solve our issues, but it's part of a larger package of ideas that people are putting to the voters to solve the revenue shortfall that we have in our city. And so the cannabis initiative does involve a 2 to 5% tax on cannabis sales. The hotel tax is a 2% increase in the hotel tax that would bring in $500,000 a year with the hotels that we have today. And the sales tax that's being proposed would bring in $1.5 million. So even with all three of those combined, we're still not meeting our budget shortfall. I mean, we need a new fire engine that costs $1.1 million. That we don't have $1.1 million. So I would attack the premise that we don't need money. And then the second argument that they made, that we should sort of wait and see. We've waited and seen since 1996 what cities and counties will do. And we've also had 2 years of experience of seeing Delray Oaks and Seaside and Salinas, seeing what they do with their medical cannabis dispensaries. And we've seen Monterey County position itself to become the center of marijuana cultivation, probably for the planet Earth, and seeing that the revenues that are coming in to Monterey County are actually saving the county from having huge budget deficits and having to lay off employees. And Monterey County is looking right now at laying off over 100 employees because they don't have enough revenues. So this new line of business for the county and for cities could potentially avoid layoffs and keep service levels higher.
So there's also this belief that the fact that we do not have cannabis clubs within Marina, that we're somehow safe from the cannabis clubs outside of Marina. Do you want to talk a little bit about that, or?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So, I serve on the Planning Commission, and we've reviewed the conditional use permits for 3 smoke shops that don't sell cannabis. They sell, glass pipes. They sell, Rastafarian T-shirts, and some of them sell tobacco and different things. And people would say that those shops would be targets for crime, or that they would bring an unsavory element to Marina. And we just really haven't seen that. During one of our meetings where we were reviewing the conditional use permits for all 3 smoke shops that we have in the city, I asked our chief, or our commander, I think it was commander at the time, how many calls for service have you had to these locations? And they told us, and I said, well, is that high or low? Like, for instance, how many calls for service have you had to Mortimer's? How many calls for service have you had to 7-Eleven? And so other businesses actually attract more crime and more nuisance than the smoke shops that we have in the city. So I don't see these businesses as being a particular target for criminal activity. Every business that's going to operate is going to have a conditional use permit that can be pulled at any time. And so the people who get these permits are going to be very financially invested in this, because they need to demonstrate that they have a 2-year plan for how much revenue they're going to bring in with realistic revenue projections. And that's going to be part of the application process. So people who have the potential to bring in more revenue are going to be more likely to be opening their shops here. There's also a pretty heavy fee to just submit your application. It's $8,000 just to submit an application. So there's going to be a lot of financial investment in this, and they're going to be feel very incentivized to keep their business free from criminal activity. So I don't see that as being a big issue. But so other types of businesses actually attract quite a bit more crime. So liquor stores and bars and gas stations and other 24-hour type operations, these businesses are going to have to close down before midnight. And so they're not going to attract the same amount of crime as the 24-hour operation businesses, which we have many in our city. And then also part of the plan that they have to submit to the city, that's sort of part of the, I use this term, beauty pageant. Anyone who wants to open a cannabis dispensary is going to have to go through the beauty pageant. They're going to have to demonstrate that they're going to have adequate security. And they'll be subject to all of the same laws that other businesses are in the city. Like their front windows have to be free from posters and things like that, so you can see what's happening inside the business to make sure there's nothing shady going on. And then also these businesses are going to have to locate in real optimal locations. They're going to have to be 600 feet away from schools, daycares, or childcare centers. They're going to have to be 1,000 feet away from other businesses, so we're not going to get a concentration of cannabis businesses in any one location. And there's really no telling. We might end up with one dispensary in our city, and maybe one indoor grow, and maybe one business that manufactures, cannabis gummy bears or something like that. It's not like Marina's going to turn into, Arcata, and be some sort of like weed city. It's not likely to happen here.
And in addition, people are already using marijuana within here in Marina as well, right?
Yeah, actually, I tell this story sometimes to folks, but my own mom was a user of medical cannabis when she was dying from cancer. And we grew up in a very conservative city, where she might have been judged for doing that. And she had to get her cannabis from a teenager, which is pretty scary because that kid is being put at risk, but she was nauseous and losing weight and dying, and she needed her medicine. And so I think of people like my mom who need access to their medicine, or people like friends that I have who've come back from the war who have PTSD, who self-medicate with cannabis. And on the Planning Commission, when we were asked to review the cannabis moratorium, I made the motion that we allow delivery to take place in Marina. For me, this was sort of a test of the city council to see how reasonable the city council was going to be around the issue of medical cannabis. So the recommendation unanimously from the Planning Commission and the City Council is that they allow medical cannabis delivery to take place in Marina, which is crazy because the police can't enforce medical cannabis delivery. It's a person driving to a house in a car and walking inside and then getting back in their car. They don't know who's delivering medical cannabis. But the City Council didn't take up our recommendation to allow medical cannabis delivery. So there's a lot of feeling on the City Council that they don't want any cannabis businesses in the city of Marina, but there are many users of medical cannabis and adult use cannabis in Marina who, some of them are older, disabled, not able to drive to Castroville or Delray Oaks, to go get their medicine or to go treat themselves. So I think because there are so many users already in Marina, and it's like an open secret that, people in Marina smoke cannabis. I don't smoke cannabis, but I don't see why we want to pretend it's not happening and not take advantage of the opportunity to bring jobs and economic development to Marina. I mean, you look at our downtown, and the corner of our downtown is a Burger King, a Jack in the Box, and a burned out building. We need economic development in our downtown, and the downtown would be the right location to have a dispensary. I think it'd probably be one of the only locations in the city where it would be allowed based on the zoning restrictions. So bringing these businesses to downtown, or maybe some of the businesses that are downtown, would expand their practice to become an adult use cannabis dispensary, medical cannabis dispensary. They're incentivized to hire Marina residents. So they can get up to 8 additional points in their application for every Marina resident that they pledge to hire. So this could bring jobs to Marina, economic development to Marina. I just think it's like a kind of a win-win all around. And, I don't think that having a cannabis dispensary would be less favorable to people in Marina than having a burned out building in our downtown.
So I do know that there are cannabis deliveries throughout Monterey County and Santa Cruz. Is there anything preventing them from delivering in Marina as it stands right now?
Yeah, technically it's illegal to deliver to Marina.
But
what we did during the Planning Commission, I asked the police commander, I said, how would you guys enforce this? And they told us it's completely unenforceable. In Marina we have a lot of property crime, theft, I'm sure it's not really out in public, but I'm sure that there are violent crimes that take place in Marina. Arresting a guy in a car for giving somebody their medicine is probably really low on the list of priorities for our police department. What the cannabis initiative would allow would be for every cannabis dispensary or business that opens in Marina would be allowed to deliver their product to their customers. So it would allow delivery in Marina.
Oh yeah. The reason why I asked that question is because I do have a friend that tells me that they do get their stuff delivered. And so I was just, thought that I would throw that out there because cannabis is apparently being delivered here in Marina. We're just not receiving the tax dollars from it.
Yeah, and I think that's an important thing to note. 5% or up to 5% within a few years of gross receipts of the business would come to the city of Marina in the form of like a local excise tax. And so it's not nothing. It's certainly some amount of money, and I think these businesses would like to kind of come out of the shadows and operate above board, and would be happy to be able to advertise their services in the city of Marina because they bring them more customers. And so I think they'd be willing to pay it starts at 2.5% and works its way up to 5% at the discretion of the city council. So they'd be happy to pay 2.5% to be able to advertise in the city of Marina. I think a lot of businesses put X% of their budget towards advertising, and they can't do that in Marina.
So is there anything else you would like to tell us specifically about the cannabis tax and why people should at least sign the petition to get it on the ballot?
I think at a minimum, we should let the people vote. When we had Prop 64 in 2016, 63% of Marina voters voted yes on Prop 64, that they wanted California to allow adult use marijuana. The poll on Nextdoor also had 63% of people indicating that they wanted that to take place in Marina, adult use cannabis dispensaries to be in Marina. So I think we have really good polling, because the election is a very good poll that says people would like this service to be available in Marina. And so having the people vote on it, I think, is the right way to go about it. We just wrote this initiative to facilitate that. We wanted people to be able to vote, and it just wasn't going to happen with the city council putting it on the ballot. The people had to put it on the ballot, and some people in the city council had said as much. So I think, people should sign it because it's very democratic to get to vote on things. I think people should look at the ordinance as it's written and see that there are going to be a lot of benefits to Marina. It's going to bring jobs to Marina. It's going to bring revenue to Marina. We absolutely need investment in our city, in our roads, in our sidewalks, in our public safety, in our parks. There's also an incentive in the ordinance for these businesses to contribute to local nonprofits and charities. So, we could turn this business into something that's really good for society. And so I think it's going to benefit Marina ultimately.
Well, I've always heard if you can't beat them, then join them, and you might as well be in control of how things are going.
Well, I think that's important, right? Like, if we didn't establish our own law, then at some point our moratorium is not going to be renewed, and then state law would trump our local law, because we wouldn't have a local law. And so we wouldn't be able to have a local tax. People would just pay the state excise tax, and the state would issue them permits in our city. So it's important to establish this is what Marina wants. Write the law the way that we want it, establish the uses that we want, and establish what revenues we'd like to come to our city. Because if we don't, because basically, if we don't do it, the state's going to do it, and we won't get any benefit from it.
So how much longer do we have to get signatures on the petition?
Given that everyone's going to be very busy around the election, I would assume that the clerk would take up to a full week, the elections department would take up to a full 30 days, and because cannabis is a little bit of a controversial issue, I would assume that the city council would take the initiative to request a 30-day report where they send the initiative language to some expert to come back with a report to talk about what the impacts would be to the city. And so if all of those things happen, full 7 days with the city clerk, full 30 days with the elections department, full 30 days for the report, if we turn the signatures in after May 31st, then the city council would not be able to consolidate our initiative with the November election, and it would trigger a special election. And we don't want to trigger a special election. They're very expensive. So we really need to get them in by May 31st. If the council decides not to request a 30-day report, then we'd have up to June 31st to turn in the signatures. But we don't have any indication from the council that they would request a 30-day report. So May 31st is really the deadline that we're shooting for.
So we have until this coming Thursday. And where can people go to sign these ballots?
Several stores are holding the petitions behind the counter. Technolock, Marina Spirit Smoke Shop, Rooster Wheels, and Coffee Mia are all holding onto the petitions. You could also contact me or the mayor, and we'll drive over to your house and get your signature.
So in addition to the cannabis petition that we have, there's also 2 other petitions going around. Could you talk to us about those as well?
Yeah, so I wrote the 2 petitions. One would be a 2% increase in our hotel tax. It's called transient occupancy tax. The other one would be a 0.5 cent increase in our sales tax. The backstory on how I came to write these was I was talking to the Marine Police Officers Association, and they had informed me that so many of the officers were going to be leaving the department to go to work for other agencies because the other agencies just paid so much better. They couldn't really justify staying in Marina if they were making $20,000 a year less than they could if they went to, say, Salinas. And this has been an ongoing issue that I've been concerned about all the way back in 2015 or 16. I was talking to the council about the risk that we were taking by not investing in our police force. Because I had worked in Salinas to help pass Measures G and H, which raised $20 million a year for the city of Salinas. And they gave their police officers and firefighters raises. and they're staffing up in their departments. So I knew that Salinas was going to be coming to raid our department for, our great officers that we have. And so I asked the Police Officers Association, like, please, nobody quit. I'm going to put together a solution. And I just sat at my computer and racked my brain and started crunching numbers and realized that I could write 2 initiatives that would potentially raise $2 million a year for the city of Marina. And that money could be used to invest in our roads, invest in public safety, invest in our parks, and really deal with a lot of the issues that I personally really cared about. It was around that time when I really kind of made my final decision that I wanted to run for city council, because these revenues that we're hoping to bring into the city, I'd really like to have a say in how they get spent. Because when I'm out talking to people, people tell me they want better roads, they want fixed sidewalks. A lot of people have been hearing about what's happening in our police and fire department and how we're at risk of losing our public safety officers, and they want us to invest in those services. So I'd like to help guide the way that this money is spent. But so I wrote the 2 initiatives. There's nothing really that magical about them because we already had ordinances in the city about transactions and use tax and about a transient occupancy tax. So literally with the sales tax, I went into our existing ordinance, turned the number 1 into 1.5, and changed the effective date from 2024 to 2034, I believe. And so it was basically just 2 edits in the entire document. So nothing, really new or innovative. It would just be that Marina would have the same sales tax percentage as most of our neighbors. So Seaside is at 9.25%. Salinas is at 9.25%, Watsonville is at 9.25%. Some cities in Monterey County, like Greenfield, are actually above 9.25%. But I think the sales tax is really important because that one raises $1.5 million. That is more money than the hotel tax and the cannabis tax combined times 2. Or times 3 probably, actually. So it's really the lion's share of the revenue that we need to generate for the city. So I think that one is really important. I think it's also really important to realize that if we don't claim the increment available to us by going from 8.75% to 9.25%, some other agency can come in and claim that. And we saw this happen in 2016 with the Transportation Agency of Monterey County putting a 3/8 cent sales tax on the ballot for Measure X. There's nothing stopping Transportation Agency from coming back and saying, we want to do transportation projects in the Monterey Peninsula. So Marina, Monterey, Delray Oaks, Sand City, we're going to claim your half-cent increment that you have available for transportation projects. So I think claiming this for ourselves allows us to dictate how we want it to be spent. I think a lot of it will end up going towards roads, but it also allows us to invest in parks, public safety, sidewalks, or maybe innovative things that people aren't really currently talking about, like affordable housing. So there's a lot of good work that we can do with this money, and it goes out for 15 years. And so in 15 years, hopefully, we'll have a mature downtown that'll be bringing in a lot more revenue to the city and to the businesses. Our city will be completely built out with the dunes, with Sea Haven, with Marina Station, hopefully with Cypress Knolls. So we'll have the property tax revenue coming in, and then hopefully we won't need this half-cent sales tax increment. It can go away in 2035, and then people can go back to paying 50 cents less for a jacket at REI or whatever they choose to buy. The hotel tax, I think that one is just sort of a no-brainer. Tourists come to our city, they stay in our hotels because they cost significantly less than the hotels in Monterey. So if they're saving $100 a night on a hotel, I don't think the tourists are going to be too upset about paying an additional $2 to stay in a city like Marina, especially if we're able to invest that money in making Marina a cooler place where tourists would want to come and shop and dine. I hesitate to think that a tourist is going to be really excited about Marina when they leave Saltwood and come into downtown Marina and see our burned out building and our crumbling streets. So the type of investment we can do in Marina could actually help more tourist dollars come to Marina and maybe turn Marina into more of a tourist destination. We have the Marina Dunes State Park, we have the beach, we have the Fort Ord National Monument, and really we're the gateway to all these great outdoor recreation activities. But it's not a very beautiful gateway. We could take this money and invest it in beautifying our city And hopefully that would mean more people would stay in Marina, spend their money in Marina, and just make Marina into a better city. So to me, it seems like a no-brainer. It doesn't cost Marina residents anything. It doesn't cost the hotel owners anything. And the tourists passing through Marina would be more than happy to pay it, especially if it means that Marina would be a better city for them to stay in.
I enjoy traveling, and I've seen that you travel often as well. Have you ever, as you're searching on a search engine to get your hotel, have you ever looked at what their hotel tax is and decided that way? Because I can tell you that I've never even noticed it till the end, until I've clicked buy.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's sort of the argument. It's like nobody's deciding on a $3,000 vacation based on how much of the transient occupancy tax the city has. I also think most people aren't really aware that it varies from city to city, and at the end on your final bill, it's such a small percentage of the bill that I don't think people are really making vacation decisions based on that. For business travelers that get like gas mileage, you're not going to stay in Salinas because they have a 12% TOT versus Marina, because Marina has a 14% TOT, just because it's going to save you $2, because the distance of driving from Salinas to Marina with the 54.5 cent per mile tax or reimbursement rate from the federal government for mileage. If you're driving 10 miles, you're spending $5.45 to reimburse your employee for gas. So you'd rather spend just $2 more to have them be in Marina if Marina's where they need to be. So I don't think anyone makes their accommodation decisions based on the TOT. And also the TOT that we're recommending isn't totally out of the ordinary. Avery and Associates is like a local consultant, and they consulted the city of Santa Cruz, the city of Salinas, and their recommendation was for cities to push up their TOT because it's kind of free money for cities, and because people don't avoid staying in cities that have a higher TOT. Monterey, around the conference center, so like Monterey's TOT is 10%, but if you're around the conference center, the closer you are, there's an additional TOT on top of that. So if you're staying in Monterey, right across the street from the conference center, you might be paying 15% TOT. So our TOT that we're recommending isn't going to disadvantage Marina hotels vis-a-vis other hotels. I think it's really going to give Marina hotels an advantage because Marina will be a better city.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much for coming and talking to us about everything. Do you have a website that people can go look up your candidacy?
Yeah, so you can check out my city council campaign website. It's www.adamformarina.com. I'm not going to try to make people guess how to spell my last name. You can also just Google City of Marina Cannabis 2018 if you want to see the website for the Cannabis Initiative. On my website, if you want to read the hotel tax, sales tax, cannabis ordinances, you can go to www.adamformarina.com/petitions. And you would be able to see links to the petitions there.
Thank you so much, Adam.
Thank you.